I had the opportunity to be town attorney. I was asked by then First Selectman Judy Novacek to consider that, and ultimately the Board of Selectmen approved me for that position. And if you remember, that was an interesting time. It was an interesting time. It was post 9/11, so there was just a lot of I would say there's a sense of unease. There was a lot of concern about security, and it was just a challenging time, that going on among other things.
If I recall correctly, you had to establish some sort of commission just for security at that time.
Right. The Department of Public Health in Connecticut asked that certain towns team up and form basically regional emergency preparedness centers, so that if there were some kind of epidemic or some kind of, God forbid, 9/11 recurrence, that people would know what to do. And that was a huge undertaking. It was a tremendous undertaking because really nobody knew how to do it. It was really being charged with something and then, kind of make it happen. So there were many meetings in Hartford that I attended with some health officials in the Bethel region, which ended up being Bethel, Reading, and Ridgefield. A lot of things were proposed at that time. A lot of rather important and impressive and widespread types of legislative changes were talked about at that time. Many of them didn't end up being very practical because as legislation goes, you really have to think through the ultimate result of legislation, and sometimes sometimes something sounds good on the surface, but when you really look at how it percolates through the system and affects various people, it's not the best way to go. So that was a great opportunity. It was a great opportunity for the people involved with that to respond to an emergency. And I think Bethel has done an amazing job, the Bethel region, with those towns in organizing that under the direction of the local public health officials, including that Laura Vasile here in Bethel. So that was a great opportunity.
It started then, and it's continuing today.
And you see these regional initiatives. You see this sense that by pooling resources, by bringing individuals, talents, money, all kinds of resources together, you can really
just getting these communities to agree with each other. I mean, as a town of attorney, I remember it all too well. What you have to do, it's really compromising and getting everybody together and saying, what are we going to do that's going to impact positively all communities?
And it's galvanizing people around a common problem, which is really what you have to do. You sort of put aside, egos and so forth, if you will, and you just say, how do we best prepare people for the next disaster, if there is one? And then everything else sort of goes away. And we were all very focused on that at that time. Like all good problem solving or all good strategizing, you really have to break it down to, what we ultimately need to accomplish. Who needs to be in on the decision? Is it going to be a legislative solution? Is it something the state does? Is it the municipalities? Is it a joint venture, if you will, between state and localities? But what is the problem, and what's the best way to go about it? And I think if you don't break it all down, and if you don't bring all the people into the decision making so that they're all on board, then you can miss something very important to what has to make it work. The practical end of things, who was going to do various things, how would these roles be filled, who would do what, who would have the risk, who would have the responsibility, who would have the authority, and all those very important issues, because if there is an emergency, you want that to just roll right out without wondering whether you've forgotten something. So very important to pool resources, and it's something that you're going to see a lot more of now, because as we enter a time when we need to pool resources, when we need to maximize resources, money and individuals and talents to get to the best result, you're going to find this kind of thing going on. It just has to. We're seeing it happen. So it was a very good experience.
But at the same time, Melanie, what I'm assessing right here, and don't let me interrupt, but I'm going to, you know me.
Yes, Paul.
I'm as bad as you. But for the viewing audience, this says to me, and I hope this is imparted, is the fact is you're going to be looking for this job as legislator. District 2, the representative, and all of this experience that you've had behind you, the underlying factor, as I assess it, is listening. Listening to the people, listening to the authorities in the various towns. This is just about a must, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes down to a legislator, okay? Because it's not what you want to do, it's what you want for your people, for your town officials. To me, that's perhaps paramount for success.
Right. So the communication is so key, but that also starts by listening. It's what is the problem, if you will? What's the opportunity? What is it that is the goal? And how do we best get there? Is it and in terms of a municipality, I've already been hearing from some of the chief officials that there are legislative changes that would just make sense in a process. For example, that so it's this give and take. It's knowing that if you communicate, that the person is going to listen and is going to respond if it's something that's appropriate to address. And so that's absolutely important. I think that the state official then knows the legislative part of things, knows maybe the funding opportunities that there are, and will hopefully look at the the bigger picture and how this can all work, and you work together, what the opportunity is, and bringing together the various resources that there are.